Hello, my name is Frank Jotzo, and today at the Crawford School we're very fortunate to welcome Rachel Kyte, who is Vice President for Sustainable Development at the World Bank, as well as Professor at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. Rachel, welcome.
Hi Frank, thank you for the invitation.
The World Bank has released a report entitled Why We Need to Avoid 4 Degrees of Warming. Can you tell us about some of the findings of the report in terms of the impacts from climate change and the risks?
Yeah, so it's unusual, I suppose, for an economics-based institution to commission the science, but we felt we didn't really have good enough answers for some of our client countries who were asking, for help in adaptation. But the question we had to ask ourselves is, well, to what are we adapting? Is it a 2 degree, 3 degree, 4 degree, 5 degree world? And that would mean perhaps very different things. And the report is quite chilling, I think, because, well, first of all, it says that we're headed for a 4 degree world by the end of the century. And at 4 degrees, we start to lose enormous amounts of cropland in sub-Saharan Africa, 35%. We start to see sea level rise of 0.5 metre or 1 metre, which will affect a number of coastal cities, particularly in this region, in Asia. And of course, with the rates of urbanisation at the moment, that becomes a bigger problem. We also see that the water-stressed countries will become even more water-stressed, and more people will be living under water stress. So hot parts of the world are going to get hotter, and wetter parts of the world will get wetter. And of course, the extreme weather events that we've been seeing are expected to continue in their intensity and continue to gain in frequency as well.
So that poses obvious challenges for development. What are the implications for the role of the World Bank in future as we may see more climate change impacts unfold?
Well, I think the report forced us to reassess what we're doing. And so we're involved in 2 real processes at the moment. One is going back through the approaches that we take to our sectoral work, to our work in transport, in energy, in agriculture, and really asking ourselves the question, is everything that we're doing building resilience at the community and country level, and is everything we're doing reducing emissions to the extent that we can? But secondly, even if we did all of that, the World Bank is but one small part of the landscape of development. We have to do something way beyond that, not least because, about 20 countries account for most of global emissions, and some of those countries are not our clients, they are our shareholders. And so the President of the World Bank has asked us to think about the least number of most important things that need to be done to attack emissions, and we've started looking at what those actions would be and where the World Bank Group could catalyse them.
And the key word that we're hearing more and more about is, of course, green growth. Can you give us some insight into the World Bank's current thinking about how environmental protection and a reorientation of the economy towards low-carbon sources can be brought in line with the growth objective that is, of course, generally overriding in the developing world? Well,
I think that, if the 4 degree report is the threat, there's nothing in the 4 degree report to suggest that this is unstoppable. The solutions are known, they just need to be deployed. So that's the threat. The opportunity is shifting the growth path to one that is cleaner, greener, and more inclusive. And the issues there are taking out the inefficiencies in the current economic system. For example, removing harmful fossil fuel subsidies that do very little for the global environment or the local environment. They do very little for the poor, although that's not always well understood within the electorate. And then pricing the things that need to be priced. So we're very interested in both carbon taxes and market-based carbon mechanisms and speeding up their adoption across countries. And then I think the really difficult thing is avoiding lock-in. So especially when one's building infrastructure, one has to sort of think about the infrastructure over the long run and making that climate resilient or making that low-carbon infrastructure. And there will be an upfront capital cost often to climate-proofing it or to choosing the more expensive but cleaner option. But over time that benefit the benefit of that will be found. So how do we bridge the sort of long-term economic clarity with the short-term political cycle? So we have to as an international community find those additional sources of financing to fund the gap between business as usual and a sort of greener business as usual. And that's very difficult in a world where there's still about $1 trillion of infrastructure that does not get financed every year.
In Australia, climate change policy has been a very big topic for a number of years. We have a legislation that provides for a price on carbon, and that in itself has created enormous amounts of political heat. I think you've been spending a lot of today up at Parliament House. Can you tell us your impressions about the Australian debate?
Well, I mean, you know, it's difficult as an international civil servant to comment on the domestic debate, but one of the points that I've been making on both sides of the aisle is that increasingly we are seeing the adoption by countries of some form of market-based mechanism around carbon, and that now we have more than 30 countries working in what we call a partnership for market readiness. So that includes the European Union, China, Australia, Korea, California, Chile, Mexico. So we're seeing really sizable economies in the world adopting carbon-based market mechanisms. And whereas 20 years ago, I think we all thought there would be a global carbon price and that would emerge from a global liquid carbon market coming from the top down, we now realise that that's not going to happen, and what you're seeing is a market being built from the bottom up. And within that community of countries who are experimenting and building markets, and within countries that are looking at their need to do so in the very near future, people look internationally at Australia as an example that they want to understand and follow. So while this is a domestic hot potato, internationally Australia is seen as a leader.
Now, to finish off with, here at Crawford School we have a large number of graduate students, many of them intensely interested in the issues around climate change and climate change policy. Any message for people who are back studying in order to make a greater difference afterwards?
Well, to coin a phrase, you have to be the change you want to be. I think my boss, President Jim Kim of the World Bank, asks us a question, and he asks leaders that he meets the same question, and it is, imagine that in 40 years' time your children or your grandchildren come to you and say the following, you know, what will be your answer? And the question that we expect, if we don't act now, our children to ask us will be, what did you do when you knew? So each of the students needs to have an answer to that question.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you.